We're going to record. There we go, the official start to Community Voices series. Welcome, everyone. Michigan Climate Action Network is proud to host all of you today. This is our monthly series. We do these virtual, and really the intent with this series is to gather voices from around the state that we can help feed into the implementation of our My Healthy Climate Plan. So back in March, we were at my home base in Kalamazoo, and we got to hear from Director Spolster, who's in the audience today, a little bit about the climate change working group there and some of the grassroots efforts by the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition and the West Michigan Environmental Action Council. And so really it's about what are groups doing, how are they managing their processes in implementing climate action plans, what are the successes they've had, what are the barriers that they face. And this is a really special edition this month because we're going to be led by our MiCAN intern, Brendan Mortensen-Seguin from Western Michigan University. Yay, Brendan, who has done us a wonderful semester-long project with us, looking at different universities, total members of the community, right? Anchor institutions usually have a lot of weight in leadership on sustainability and climate issues. So we thought, what better way to recognize him and do this work than to have our universities talk about how they're committed to climate action and how they're exploring sustainability in different ways. So today's program, you don't have to listen to me for very long. Brendan is going to take over, and he has really developed these questions and develop the panelists and the whole show. So it is going to be his show to run. If everybody wouldn't mind, a quick introduction in the chat is always nice so that we know a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from, location in Kalamazoo, since we're virtual. I'm actually not in Kalamazoo today, of all things. So we want to know where you're at, where you're coming from. And if you could, I'm sure this group will be conversational and has a lot to say. If there's a question that comes up, you'll throw it in the chat so that you don't forget it. And if it seems really timely or urgent, like, oh, that's what we're talking about right now, Brendan, I'll help you out and let you know that there's a question in there, and I'll monitor the chat. Otherwise, we'll try to save those for the end, and we will save some time for questions at the end to put those all together. But I'm just so pleased to welcome you all and to welcome Brendan to the stage here. He's done such a great job for us and has such a huge role. Our panelists today are Alan Turnquist from Michigan Technological University. Hi, Sherri. Sherri Jett from Michigan State University, and Drew Horney from the University of Michigan. I just have one quick announcement before I turn the total floor over. And that is, if you haven't been paying attention to our world, 2 weeks from today, at this very moment in time, we will be hosting our Michigan Climate Summit. This year's theme is sharing our stories. We are really leaning into the idea that, yes, we need to be guided by the physical science, but we also need to be engaging with the artists and the educators and the cultural movement that really can make this populous and turn this implementation of the My Healthy Climate Plan as fast as possible. It's going to be a very fun day. There's a storytelling show the evening before at the Crowfoot in Pontiac, and then we're over at Oakland University the whole next day. If you haven't registered yet, don't worry. Colleen and I will still let you in, probably through next Tuesday or Wednesday. Today was technically the deadline, is why I'm saying that, but you're here and you're our friends, so we're going to let you in. Don't worry. We want you there. If cost or travel is a barrier, please let me know and we will get you in, because we want to make sure that everybody comes over and has a wonderful day with us. So I think I'll throw that link in the chat if you want to check out some of our summit pieces. But otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing. And Brendan, turn the floor over to you to introduce our panelists a bit more and kick us off.
Hi, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Keel. As the warm introduction was saying, this past semester I've been interning at MiCAN, helping write a report and a compilation of many of the years of university efforts in climate change. I'm sure some of our panelists will know, who have been working for 20 years, there is a lot. So I'm glad that I get to have such a great panelists on to talk about what the universities are doing from such a wide variety of schools as MSU, U of M, and Michigan Tech. I'm happy that we get to look at all of the different ways that universities can pursue climate resilience, how many of the different solutions are found, and we get to expose them all to you today. So beyond this short introduction for our panelists, I'd like to get them to introduce themselves as well. If we could start with, on my screen, it's going Alan, Drew, and then Sherri. In that order, we would love to get you guys to personally talk about how you got involved in the work, um, and a short career pathway.
Sure. Thanks for passing the mic, Brendan. Alan Turnquist. I'm at the Michigan Technological University, way up in the UP. And, I think everybody's got a long, winding road when it comes to career. I don't know that many people that have been totally linear, but I've always been really connected to nature. And as an undergraduate, I was actually most, I think, engaged in almost more of an activism side of things. And so I'll date myself here, but this was back when there were NAFTA protests and all challenges about indigenous rights in Mexico and environmental issues with sort of global trade. So really that was one of my first portals into seeing how, this is such a global level challenge, and how all of our systems kind of work together to have major impact on people and environment. And that just set me down a road where I started to get interested in law and policy, and I ended up going that direction in grad school, and I went to law school actually. But so I'm a recovering lawyer at this point. But for me, it was syncing my personality with the way I spend my time every day. And I'm not an adversarial person. I actually think there's so much we can get done in collaboration and getting things kind of done together. So that led me to higher education and research and outreach with extension service, mostly around sustainable agriculture and education, and eventually into the role where I am now, where there are still some community outreach aspects and certainly some strong education components around sustainability and climate change in higher education. That's the mission of our institutions. So really helping to bring some of those efforts together, but also really folding in the sort of stewardship aspect of an institution, in a place like Houghton, where Michigan Tech is. The university is almost as large as the city itself in terms of how much energy we consume and water we consume. And so really bringing us up to speed and trying to reduce impacts from that is a very new conversation at Michigan Tech. And so a key part of my role that's different for me over the last few years is really starting to steer that ship to have some of the goals that we'll talk about further on. So the education part and engagement part has been a really heavy piece of my life throughout, but transitioning into also help support some of those facilities and operational aspects that we're all driving for so much more as climate change management gets to be central to pretty much every institution.
Hey everybody, Drew Horning from the University of Michigan. I would say that I similarly am kind of a winding road accidental environmentalist. I was not really focused on it when I went to college. I grew up here in Michigan and went to the University of Arizona, mainly because it was warm and I wanted to get away from Michigan for a while. But in the process, I was studying business and economics, and in the process, just being exposed to just the Sonoran Desert ecosystem and all that it had to offer. It was so different than Michigan. Seeing the native populations and just a large contingent of Mexican and that Latinx population around just really opened my eyes to how these issues were all interconnected. And when I realized it was something that I really wanted to focus on, I was already graduated and I had taken like no environmental classes. So I was a stockbroker for 5 years and really decided I wanted to shift gears and use my business acumen in the world of sustainability. And at the time, there was an emerging program at the University of Michigan, which has now been around for a long time. At the time, it was called the Corporate Environmental Management Program, and it was a dual business degree with the School of Environment. And so that's when I entered the path. I focused a lot on energy systems and the interplay between the electricity grid and distributed generation technologies, and worked in that space for a few years. And then came back to the university and have been here for a little over 20 years, all across the institution. So I started out being the managing director for that program that I graduated from. And that from there moved to what's called the Graham Sustainability Institute, which is an interdisciplinary institute that connects interdisciplinary faculty teams and student teams with external partners, and we try to work together collaboratively to solve real world problems. And through the course of that time, really got pulled into a lot of cross-institutional efforts and led things around getting our first campus sustainability goals off the ground back in 2011, developing a lot of our campus culture programs, and stewarding those and then handing them off as appropriate. And then being involved with the President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality from 2018 to 2021. And in the last couple of years, additionally advising the president and supporting our CFO on the campus side. So it's been a winding road. It feels like I'm right now focused a lot more on the operational piece than I have historically. But as Alan said, I think what I've learned through the Institute experience and working with faculty and external partners and students and a broad range of stakeholders is that collaborative process of involving people from the very beginning to define the challenges, to solve the problems together is going to be critical for our infrastructure challenges as well.
All right, Sherri, Jett, Michigan State University. I am the Director of Utilities here. I've been here, it'll be 5 years in July. My background, my degree's in chemical engineering. I've been in the energy industry, in utilities, my entire career. So that's over 25 years now. Starting out 10 years actually in oil and gas production. Then I moved to the power generation side of the business, working 17 years with an international engineering procurement construction firm where we designed and built power plants, did power plant retrofits for air emission controls, and then renewable energy projects. My last 3 years with them before coming to MSU, I live and worked in Asia, working on projects, energy projects in Asia, including wind, solar, battery energy storage, one geothermal. And so I joined MSU and, well, actually, I'm going to back up. Somebody asked me a few weeks ago, we had a student tour through here, and somebody asked me why I made the choices I did in my career. And my answer was, I've always wanted to do something that makes a difference, and energy touches everybody. Energy touches everybody. And it's a fabric of our lives. And well, 30 years ago, or nearly 30 years ago, I started out my career, climate and climate action wasn't really a thing, right? It wasn't obvious the impact human decisions we're making or having on the climate and the planet and the future. One of the reasons I moved from oil and gas production to power generation was because I wanted to move into an area where I could start diversifying and different types of energy and supporting different types of energy production and helping to improve emissions reductions and things like that. Part of my job here as Director of Utilities at Michigan State University, quite frankly, we're a small city of our own. We have our own cogeneration power plant. We generate steam and electricity for our campus. We also have our own drinking water treatment plant. We treat and make our own drinking water and distribute it on campus as well. So we're a utility, and that's my team. And part of my job is to not only provide those critical services to campus, but to collaborate and work and help define the path to for the future to continue to reduce our carbon footprint, move towards even more sustainable operations. And in my mind, sustainability isn't just about carbon footprint. Sustainability is much more complicated than that. And the solution in my mind for sustainable operations, and if you just look at carbon footprint reduction, there's no one solution that will fix everybody's issues, right? We all have unique situations of our campuses, our operations, you know, our energy use. It's really going to be, in my mind, a combination of things, a combination and a continuous step forward as we identify solutions and new technologies developed and things become more cost effective, you know, those kinds of things. It's a journey.
Thank you. I think that I think it really says a lot, the different winding paths all three of the panelists went on, and how they all end up leading to some type of environmental work, working with climate. I think it just shows how a lot of the different pathways we go to can all end up in a very similar place. I think it's great to see the variety between you three. Now switching on to a different topic, talking a little more on the institutions of or the different universities, I'd like to ask, what are some of the innovations, the accomplishments and successes that you guys have seen at all three of your institutions? And I'll switch it up. I'll just start with Drew, Sherri, Alan, or whoever would like to go.
Since you named me first, I'll go. You know, I think we could go way back. I mean, we converted our coal plant to a combined cycle natural gas plant decades ago. I think in the 60s is when we turned to natural gas. And at the time, it wasn't for environmental purposes. It was an economic decision. But when you think about the emissions that we saved over the years by doing that, it's pretty huge. But we didn't really start looking at climate as a topic like most until I would say the 2000s, early 2000s, and have implemented a lot of things around typical areas of energy efficiency and culture programs, and trying to change the behavior and the operations of the university. I think our biggest innovation or recent accomplishment is really more process oriented, in that we completed this President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality. The report was produced and finalized in 2021. And I say that because we've received a lot. I've been asked to speak to a lot of other universities about the process, about the output, and about the goals and the recommendations. And many have said from what they've seen, if not the most, it's one of the most comprehensive of any university. So having been involved with that, I'm proud of that effort. And now we're really into implementing that. So we ran out of the gate and started implementing those recommendations. We've implemented a revolving energy fund that's already doled out $10 million. We are in the process of procuring 100% of our electricity from renewables. We just put out an RFP for to find a partner to help us install 25 megawatts of solar on our facilities. So really just moving out on the great work that the commission did and starting to implement it. I think will pave the way for the innovations and accomplishments that we can point to over the next few years.
How about Sherri next?
Sorry about that. I was answering the question in the chat. I'll come back to that. Innovations. MSU, our cogen plant was also coal-fired. We didn't make the conversion as early as University of Michigan did, but it was a 10-year, roughly a 10-year journey to convert all the units over from solid fuel to natural gas. And we completed that transition April of 2016. And that alone resulted in just huge step forward in our carbon footprint reduction. But we've done a number of other things as well. Conservation and efficiency has to be part of any program. If you don't need it, it doesn't have to be produced. So conservation is a big effort. Efficiency is a big effort. We also installed 10.5 megawatts of carport solar. That's been operational on campus since the end of 2017. We have also been actively installing higher efficiency equipment in our power plant. We added 3 9.4 megawatt reciprocating combustion engines and a high efficiency auxiliary boiler just in the last 2 years. The net result of those 2 pieces of equipment, adding that into our mix, has allowed us to operate our cogen plant. We've made step improvements in efficiency, and I can tell you right now, our weekly natural gas consumption is lower than our weekend natural gas consumptions used to be 3 years ago or 5 years ago. So we've just in the last 2 years reduced our total natural gas consumption by over 10%. So we are making steps forward, and we're looking for how best to do it in a way that is economically sustainable, that is maintainable, that is responsible, socially responsible. Okay. If you think about it, we can't spend hundreds of millions of dollars to install a technology if that drives the cost of our tuition up to the point where we can no longer serve our primary purpose. Students can't afford to go to school here, or only certain students can afford because others can't afford. So we're doing the best we can to identify those steps forwards to continue moving the pendulum, but do it in a fiscally and socially responsible way so that we can be here for decades and hundreds of years to come and fulfill our mission for research and education. I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox. Get a little passionate about this stuff.
It's no worries. I definitely enjoy the visualizer for the weekly emissions versus past weekend. That definitely puts in perspective some of the steps MSU has made. All right, Alan.
Okay, so I'm gonna just maybe take a slightly different tact at this. I should say I am about 1.5 years into my position here as the Director of Sustainability and Resilience, and I'm the first full-time sustainability officer at Michigan Tech. And so, you know, I want to highlight something from my perspective. It's like it's getting this ball rolling. You know, we've talked about universities as being like a small city. Well, you could also visualize them as this giant ship, or that has a lot of momentum going in a certain direction, right? And so some of what we're doing as sustainability officers is sort of introducing a whole new set of outcomes that we want to be considered in this mix of financial and delivering on our mission and all that sort of stuff. So I think the key learning point for me as someone charged with change making here is to find ways to sort of integrate these sustainability goals with supporting the broader mission of the university and the financial health. So I think Sherri really did a great job of talking about that towards the end of her time just a minute ago. And to loop back to a place like Michigan and Drew, for example, that I think have, maybe more of closer to a decade of more intensive planning around the how aspects of this, there's a really nice playbook out there for somebody like me to lean on, and so I can look and I can understand that carbon management and energy management at an institutional level kind of has a hierarchical approach in terms of biggest impact and most desirable pathways. So, planning for a lower carbon future so that the buildings and the remodels, or even like our overall energy infrastructure, can have a lower footprint, like that can take decades to do, right? Like, so this year, we have money in the budget to hire consultants to look at our utilities with decarbonization as a key driver for the future. And that conversation has not happened at Michigan Tech. And so it's a new idea, right? But how do we do that in a way that also fits those kind of financial outcomes that we need? And there's a lot of room from where we are for both of those things to happen. It's not necessarily, that you're sacrificing the quality of education or your financial outcomes to do this, but the planning matters and the timing matters. So having those conversations, I think, with our engineering services team and even the lead administration at the university, just having those conversations and being a part of those processes has really opened so many doors already. So, we have a couple of new buildings planned on campus. We're actually growing, bucking the trend a bit with enrollment at other institutions. And so, as we move into having a new residence hall constructed right out the bat, as we're requesting proposals for that, it's driven by, sustainable outcomes. Sort of lead gold as a minimum, looking for even a platinum in this energy and emissions category. So really trying to leverage some of those goals and partnerships to bring innovation in. I think those conversations are things that that's what makes the difference, to be at the table and to weave some of these objectives in from the beginning. So I just wanted to highlight that as in some sense, that in itself is an innovation, like internally in the university. How do we actually start to have these sustainability goals be a part of all the major conversations that are happening? And one other thing I just wanted to highlight from Michigan Tech on the sort of innovation front, while we are maybe a little bit, playing some catch up on our operations side, we're doing a lot of things there. But on our research and education side, I think we have, we're really out leading in a lot of ways. And so we serve as a regional test center for the Department of Energy for solar. And we get a lot of snow. We have a lot of challenges up here. So how do we think about implementing solar and wind technologies in harsh climates? And layer on top of that is, how does that integrate into the existing grid, as there's different intermittency problems here. As if it snows a foot, we're not going to be producing any solar energy for a while until that melts off the panels, etc. And so, we have a partnership with the Department of Energy and researchers across the country to test different sorts of technologies, and we weave students into that. And our next step, where we're trying to connect dots, is to combine that with what we also have a lot of in the region, are abandoned mines. And abandoned mines can serve as giant batteries for intermittent power. And this is something where it's not a technological leap; it's more of a social and community integration leap. So we can pump water in these mine shafts vertically when we have power coming from our photovoltaics and wind, and use it when we're not having that supply. And so those sorts of things are opportunities for us to both advance things on a grid scale, but also really to serve our mission as a research institution and an education institution. So I think aligning around some of those innovations that, might take a decade to play out in terms of how they impact the grid, it also right now helps us and strengthens us as an institution and opens up access to some of the federal resources to answer these questions. So I'm really excited about where we are at in the role that we're playing and trying to move some of some of these changes forward to open the door for a stronger renewables portfolio inside of the grid, for example.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I really like to highlight that in my report, universities, how they institutionalize sustainability. As institutions, the planning aspects are incredibly important and how they're steering the ship on these goals. So seeing 3 different universities with wildly different or much like a lot of variance in the planning structures and what's being done is really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I know you guys were just talking about some of the different struggles, but I'd really like to highlight one challenge or barrier that the university has struggled with and how it was overcame or how the university is currently overcoming it. And this time I'll start with Sherri and then Alan and then Drew. Keep the pattern going. Yeah, whenever you're ready, Sherri.
Biggest challenge. I'm not even sure how to answer that.
It is
The topic is sustainability is just so complicated. There's so many aspects of it, and maybe that's the biggest challenge. I can say a couple of different things, I think. One, we as an institution just a few years ago established some new sustainability strategic goals. And I think that was instrumental, because from the top down, there needs to be a goal, a direction. What are we aiming for? So that's important. Just recently, we recruited a new chief sustainability officer for the university, Chip Mo, who comes to us from the Ford healthcare system. He's been with us, what now, Laura? Maybe a whole month. So he's drinking from the fire hose. This is a large, complicated institution. If you think about it, we have over 3,200 acres in the East Lansing campus. We have over 500 buildings. Over 108 of those are academic buildings. We do research, we do academics, you name it. It's big, complicated, lots of arms on the octopus. So that I would say is our next challenge, is now that we have the new strategic goals, is bringing all those arms of the octopus together, right, to develop the plans to execute the goals. And we're just starting that part of the journey now that we have new goals. And there's been a lot of leadership change at the top of the university as well. And I think everybody can recognize anytime you have leadership change, priorities can change or confusion can set in, right? Has something changed? So I think we're still working our way through change and working on reestablishing the sustainability office and teams and to be able to actively work on and put together a plan that will help us make progress on the new goals. Quite frankly, I think those are some of our biggest challenges right now.
Yeah, I actually would echo what Sherri said. I think it's sort of an iterative process for change making here, and our administration has gone from tell us what we need to know and what we need to do to saying, oh yeah, I've actually heard the president and I've heard our CFO say decarbonization in major meetings, and this is like that did not happen 2 years ago. Right, so I think that's a step. And then when it comes to implementation, practical things like staffing challenges. We had a couple of key people leave, and our energy manager got pulled 5 directions, and then our energy manager left, and now we have a new one. And so I'm 6 months behind where I hoped I would have been on pursuing some of these energy efficiency projects, for example, on campus. And those are just practical bumps that I think anybody that's in this knows it's a long haul, and the important part is to put the flag in the ground and try to make that constant progress on it. And one thing, thinking about this from just a much broader perspective, and Drew, I know you said that you have some economics background, and I think about the larger constraints that some of us operate in as we feel a sense of urgency to really move on climate in particular. And there's still an ongoing challenge that, the way that we calculate our costs for energy, they don't include any social cost of emissions, right? So we're doing a lot of harm to the outside world, and that doesn't show up on our balance sheet, right? And so how can I, as a sustainability officer, start to make that a part of our conversation and calculating the net present value on some of these investments? It's not just how many dollars are we going to save on utilities? It's what's the impact on the world of reducing our emissions, because that's what's driving this, right? I mean, that's why we're doing it, but we don't have those tools yet, and it still doesn't show up on our balance sheet. So, I don't expect that to get solved. We're not going to overcome that this week or next week, Brendan, but it's always something that's on my mind. I think if we take some middle road on social costs of carbon and incorporate that in, our paths on the financial side and investment side look very different. But I'm not there yet. And I don't think most institutions are, because it's a theoretical concept, not one that actually impacts your bottom line right now.
Yeah, I might sound a bit like a broken record. I'm a real systems dynamics, systems thinking perspective kind of guy. And that was the focus of my graduate work around energy. And if you're just trying to, poke at this and poke at that and solve this problem, solve that problem, it may get you incrementally where you need to go, but you also might create new problems. And it's, looking at the whole system and figuring out how do we move this massive system in the right direction? What are the levers to make that happen? I think is critical. And, we also are, I've talked to some people who came from Michigan State, and they say, wow, Michigan State's way more centralized than this place is. So at Michigan, we are highly, highly decentralized. Deans have much decision-making authority. We have 19 schools and colleges. When we launched the carbon neutrality plan, that was not just inclusive of the Ann Arbor campus, but also Flint and Dearborn and all of our satellite locations, which increasingly we're developing a presence in Detroit. So there's just different geographic spaces. There's different cultural spaces. Our work encompasses our entire health system, which is pretty much 50% of our footprint. The athletics department. And so all of these entities are different. They're culturally different. They're operationally different. And so trying to work on systems and policies and approaches that resonate, the sticks and carrots that you need to move everybody in the right direction, that is a huge challenge. And everyone in all of those places has a role to play, but it's our job to help them understand what that role is. Because if we talk to them about our scope 1 emissions and what's, the emissions from our power plant, they're thinking, what control do I have over that? And so thinking about the scope threes and commuting and purchasing decisions, finding ways to engage them, engage everyone to make them understand that they have a huge role to play in helping move the university forward is critical. And then if I didn't even mention academics, right? We have thousands of experts, and those folks have loud voices sometimes, and students are very strong voices for advocacy. So there are a lot of folks who want us to move faster and faster, and sometimes we can only move so fast because of those economic constraints or because of the technical challenges. And one of our biggest technical challenges is, I'm really glad that somebody decided to convert our power plant from coal to natural gas 50, 60 years ago. But that's not going to do it going forward. I mean, our goal for scope 1 is not carbon neutral. Our goal that we set was eliminate emissions by 2040. That means not having a natural gas power plant or if it is there, it better have true and effective carbon capture capabilities on it. But we need to do a fuel switch. We need to do a technology switch. We need to do something that's going to eliminate those emissions. And that is a massive challenge. The technological marketplace is moving fast, much faster than it ever has. But you look at technologies like advanced nuclear or biogas on a sustainable, marketable scale. We're probably looking at 10 years minimum to get there. And so we have a lot of challenges infrastructure wise. And our power plant, like MSU, is primarily a steam plant, and it is connected to our entire central campus and our medical system. So it's supplying heat to heat the buildings, to heat the water, and the electricity is basically a free byproduct in addition to our heating. So that's a huge infrastructure challenge. But in order to get there, we need to get the systems dynamics issues addressed first. How do we move the whole ship together? As it reminded me when he said that we had a president or a provost named Terry Sullivan who went on to be the president at UVA, and she used to say, university presidents are like tugboat captains. They don't steer the ship. They sort of point the direction and hope everybody else will follow. And I think the sustainability work is a lot like that. We have to kind of show everybody their direction and have them follow along.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's definitely really interesting to hear about the decentralized versus centralized kind of campus planning. I have two more questions before a couple Q&As. Andrew, you were helping answer the next question about future innovations you'd like to see. So I'm going to use this next question actually to just shoot out a couple of future innovations you'd like to see at the university, just in the sake of time. If you'd like to say a couple that you'd really like to see, just the ideas, not getting too into depths. We'll start with Alan again.
All right, so I'm thinking about 5 different things at once. But for us we have a 75-year-old gas steam plant here as well. And so how do we move away from that? I think the utility scale, at least on campus, is it's a real question. And so, the first step is working with some outside experts to identify some potential. But I know from some past conversations and our unique kind of characteristics and opportunities at Michigan Tech, I think some things like geothermal and some pumped underground storage, hydro in abandoned mines, which we have multiple on campus. Some of those things are super appealing to me, not only because they're technologically feasible and economically feasible, but also because they kind of tie into the culture and history of our place. And I think it would be fantastic for a place that was the mining school to begin to use some of these things for, let's just say this renewable energy and renew them and sort of, turn them from something that could be a potential liability to something that's an asset. So that would be an amazing alignment of the stars, and I would be excited about innovation in that space.
Let's go Drew next.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I think we have our base recommendations from the President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality had geo exchange as a major part of the solution. Drives energy efficiency. It is clean, and allows you to power everything with renewable electricity. And we've embarked on that. We have a North Campus utility master planning effort going on right now, and the consultants are charged with what does the district system look like to decarbonize this entire campus, which we think we can replicate at Dearborn and at Flint and on our athletic campuses. It gets a lot harder on our central campus because it's in the heart of Ann Arbor, as you can see in the picture behind me. And there's tons of infrastructure, there's tons of interconnections with the city. There's not a lot of land available to do geo. And so, in the absence of a fuel switching or a technology switching that allows us to keep our existing power plant going, there are advances happening right now based off of oil and gas drilling, which is directional drilling for geo. And there are a few firms who are doing that, but if that market can evolve and you could actually find ways to dig straight down and then across so that you can actually go under infrastructure and under existing buildings, that opens up a whole new world of possibility that is not quite there yet, but I think would be an innovation that I would love to see evolve and be implemented on campus.
The challenge is going to be cost, right? Or that's the first challenge, because what I remember the commission, this U of M Sustainability Commission report was forecasting like $3.3 billion for that geothermal heat exchange. Yeah, I think all three campuses, and that didn't even include the electrical infrastructure upgrade that would be necessary, because when you do geothermal, what you actually increase your electrical use. Geothermal systems use more electricity, so your electric use actually goes up, and so you end up having to generally add electrical distribution infrastructure to support that. So there's costs associated there. Plus, if you're steam now, you're going to hot water, so you'll have building, cooling or heating, and potentially cooling. Do you use steam for cooling as well, or just for heating?
For both, and the building conversion costs were a part of those numbers.
Yeah, yeah.
The distribution system was. But.
Yeah. So how are you guys overcoming? If you're going down that path, where's $3.3 billion plus coming from? Is that part of the challenge?
The CFO on that one, but I mean, this was what the report spelled out, and the challenge is how do you do it, right? Where do you find those monies?
Yeah.
And ideally, we get a lot of support from federal government, from state government, and if we as a society are going to get serious about this problem, those that make policy are going to need to incentivize this work. It can't just fall to the individuals. I mean, right now in Ann Arbor, we have this 2030 plan for the city, and they're working hard to get people to solarize and convert. But how many people? When we're a wealthy community, how many people are going to pay $30,000 for a heat pump when they can pay $10,000 for a furnace and an air conditioner? It's just it's one of those decisions where you have to make it logical for them to do that, because most people are not going to be swayed by the environmental benefits, and most institutions aren't going to be swayed. So we need help.
Right. I think that's a great segue, actually, to a couple of our audience questions, specifically Bo Brockett. Hi, Bo, Michigan Environmental Council. What can alumni do, right? So I think here's a huge audience for folks to be thinking about donations, of course, but Bo's question is broader than that. Many of us are out here working in the environmental field, and we're here as resources to you. We could be resources to students. I wonder how much you've, thought about how the alumni can really factor into these pieces too.
I really hope that starts happening. My experience, I've only been here 5 years, but my experience to date is most alumni are focused towards either academic or research programs or athletic programs. That's where their focus is. Where we need the help is on our infrastructure, you know, and our and investments towards supporting some of these conversions and, you know, projects that either reduce consumption, you know, improve efficiency, or our technology changes that result in energy supply with less carbon, right? That's where we need the help, in my opinion.
Drew, Alan, how about, I know there's some alumni on that president's committee, and you have Voices for Carbon Neutrality with a lot of fine folks on there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's it, right? I mean, there are many ways that alumni can help. I mean, the traditional ways are, you know, help support with if you know, if you have the means through donations and things of that. But just I think we have 600,000 plus alumni at Michigan, and you know, the connections that those people have. We're connected to everything in the world, every new technology, every, you know, emerging business in this area. So helping to make those connections for us and help us to understand all that's out there is critically important, and to you know, keep sort of nudging us in the direction. So the Voices for Carbon Neutrality, it's a relatively small group, but they've just been consistent and persistent and vocal. And our new president, Santa Ono, is, you know, he's talked with them on multiple occasions, and he's involving, you know, getting their perspectives, and we're involving it in our focus groups around the campus master plan and other things. So, you know, the engagement is extremely helpful. And the other thing is that it breaks down that wall where it's sort of like, if there's always going to be a lack of understanding of what's happening inside versus what appears to be happening outside. So if you open up that communication line, it starts to flow both ways, and then better ideas come in, and more collaboration. So just being involved, being consistent and persistent, I think is what we're looking for.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Both the challenge that Sherri mentioned, that, you know, where we really need a lot of help is building up some resources for making the infrastructure change. And that's not typically a space where alumni have donated heavily, unless it's for, you know, a building with naming or something like that. But, you know, I don't understand why that couldn't change with time. But initially I reported to our CFO, and I remember, you know, my second week on the job, she's just like, I've gotten three alumni that were through here during alumni weekend. We're like, you guys got to do more on sustainability, you know, and like they hear that, right? So the engagement part, it doesn't require any money. It requires you sharing your perspective with a place that you care about, and those voices are heard, you know. So I think that's great as a starting point. You know, we also, I think all of us have alumni out in the field that are truly experts in technological development and, you know, in change making and all of that. So we can, you know, potentially leverage that expertise as well. Although there's a lot on campus as well. And then, you know, there's also, I think, important ways that we can take some of those you know, existing desires to really support the student experience and channel them into the sustainability realm. You know, this is the great challenge of our time, right? There are others, but certainly equipping students to solve these problems is something that is a key part of our role as a university. And so, you know, I've been fortunate enough to work with some alumni donors who have now support a scholarship here for climate change. And so, you know, we have students that are doing that, and there's professional development related to it. So I think all of those resources are, you know, are welcome, and a powerful way that alumni can just help shape the way that we, you know, both manage our infrastructure and kind of our mission centric aspects there with the educational component.
Yeah, for sure. And Paula and Kate, I see your comments in the chat. We are, you know, most of the research on from donors and giving really points to the idea that most donors now are issue-based donors. And we're seeing that climate, environment, sustainability issue-based donor category just take off. And so, you know, from where you sit with your positions and your marketing and comms and other folks, I do think, you know, making sure your actions are highlighted, and we're making sure there are opportunities to to specifically give money, time, resources to these efforts. There's just a disconnect I see out there in that world, because there's so many people now who absolutely want to do issue-based donating on this piece. And I'd be remiss if I didn't follow up with one. I know your CFOs aren't here, but Kate Miller and I worked on 350.org for a long time, and so she's got to ask this question about divestment. And I know that might not be in your wheelhouse, but maybe you know a little bit about those. We understand, right? Of course, it costs money. There's also, as Alan pointed out, the social cost and the cost of inaction, right? And we don't also want to be putting money into throwing good money after bad, as they said. Anyone want to comment on divestment efforts at the university?
Sure, we've embarked on that path. Our regents voted for it right around the same time we finished the PCCN report, and it went down a separate path. The PCCN was not asked to look at that because the regents were actively looking at it, and we have a commitment to be carbon-free, carbon neutral by net zero by 2050. Have already divested from direct investments in any fossil fuel and extraction companies, and invested heavily in the last 2 years on renewables and other clean energy technologies, which has paid off at least for the last couple of years. So it's a path that we're on, and it's going to be a tough road. I mean, the endowments are tricky because the types of investments that are in them are complex. There's a lot of different stuff. It's not like we just buy stocks. We have a lot of private equity and venture capital and things like that, which make it a little bit trickier, but we are on that road. I actually just our marketing sustainability marketing guy just sent yesterday an article about this issue, and it has like a database of all the universities, so I'll try to track that down and send it to you.
Alan's actually not on campus, and so we're gonna let him off the hook a little bit early. He's coming from a library that's gonna close on him, so we'll thank him later. Sherri, I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that, and then we'll open the floor here a little bit more.
That is outside of my wheelhouse, but to my knowledge, I don't believe any action's been taken in that area. And to be honest, my focus is really one, planning for the critical infrastructure and you know, the scope 1 and scope 2, attacking those emissions, but also my personal mission is educating every student that comes to tour this facility. And now I'm reaching out and I'm starting to do some lectures and classes as well about how each individual, what they can be doing themselves to make a difference. Their own personal footprint, right? It makes a difference. So
For sure. And
that's
every little bit does. And we totally hear you. Sherri needs more funding, I think, is my message today. We can maybe help you out with that. You know, our last question, and it is 1 o'clock, is always, what can the network do to support you, the Michigan Climate Action Network? And I think some of these ideas today, you know, we have a vast network across the state who are climate friendly and minded and want to do those kinds of investments. And so I think this is why we're doing this. I think, Sherri, it was you that said, you know, our universities are like little cities. Last year, MiCAN did a cities report on how cities were accomplishing these successes and goals and how they were moving towards climate action. And that's why we wanted to focus on universities, right? Because within the city, they are the next usually biggest landowner or utility user. So how are you all doing and what do you all need? So this is really about being able to spotlight those efforts and help give you shine some light on them so people know what's going on and what your challenges are as well. And so I'll just add that, you know, we're happy to take interns like Brendan from all your universities too, to keep all of this going would be maybe one quick way that I can support all of you. So I'm going to formally thank our panelists, even though Alan had to jump off early, and really thank Drew and Sherri for your time today, and also your dedication to the report that Brendan is writing, that on the recording, it's on me right now why that's not out, folks. Okay, I still have to go through the whole thing and make sure we're good and get that back to everyone. So we will be releasing that report. But everybody give Brendan and our panelists a big hand on the recording first.